What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to do a recap on the BFL at Patoka Lake. So the BFL came to my home lake, and it was the first BFL of the year. Actually, it was supposed to be the second, but the Rough River Lake tournament got moved to Lake Monroe because Rough River was 30 feet high with all the rains and stuff we had this spring. So first tournament was at Patoka because of that. And Patoka was also high. Patoka was a little over 9 feet high, and it was rising too. So the water had gotten really high, like at the beginning of April, and then it started dropping. And then we got some rain like a week or so before the tournament, and it started rising again. So anyways, it ended up being about 9 foot high. The fish wanted to spawn really bad. It was May 10th, but you couldn't see many of the fish. And I think it was because the water was so high. There was a lot of water that was like in like these brown bushes or brown weeds that used to be on the bank. And there weren't very many clear spots on the bottom for those fish to spawn. So I don't know if the fish were spawning a little bit deeper or if they were spawning in areas that I didn't look or what. But it seemed like a lot of the fish I did see weren't that big. And when I did see one, there weren't very many of them. I had maybe a few beds marked, but nothing crazy. So went into the tournament. There was a little bit of fish guarding fry, but I only seen a few of those. And like I said, those were hard to see too because of all the grass and everything. Never really saw that much fry, so I was assuming that a lot of those fish were spawning. But like I said, I never really like physically saw the fish on the bed. It was more of a like I would cast to the edge of the weeds, and you would get bit like that. So I think those fish were spawning on the edge of that brown grass that I was talking about, and that kind of made it a little bit more difficult because not everybody was out there sight fishing. Those fish were out a little bit deeper in probably 4 to 6 foot deep spawning. So I pretty much kept it simple again. I pretty much did the same thing that I did the week before at Lake Monroe, and that was to throw a wacky rig around a lot. And like I said in my last breakdown video, a wacky rig is a great bait around the springtime. It gets a lot of bites, and there was a lot of fish up shallow. So basically what I would do is I would throw that wacky rig straight out in front of the boat and let it sink down. And I had to let it sink a little farther than I did at Lake Monroe because those fish at Monroe were a little bit shallower, because they had a lot more clear bottom and stuff than the ones at Patoka. The ones at Patoka, like I said, I think were trying to stay out away from that grass a little bit more. So I would basically throw it out parallel with the bank and just kind of slowly work it back. And when you got around one, they would bite it. But it was kind of hard to find some of them fish, and you had to fish slow, but you had to cover a lot of water at the same time. There was a few creeks that I felt like had more fish doing that, and there was a lot of creeks that I would go into and practice that you couldn't get bit. So in the tournament, I just decided to concentrate on maybe like 5 or 6 creeks that I thought I could get bit in, and kind of slow down and try to really pick those apart. It almost worked out really good. I ended up missing way too many fish and probably had the bites to do really well or potentially even win, because the weights, I think it took 12 pounds, 15 ounces to win. I had 3 for 10 pounds. So 3 more pounds and would have won. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. Sometimes it's your time to win, sometimes it's not. So the baits that I used, like I said, was a wacky rig. And I kind of talked about all this in my Lake Monroe breakdown. But basically, it's just a green pumpkin Yamamoto Cinco 5-inch. And it's green pumpkin with black flake, and I use a weedless wacky. It's a Gamakatsu G Finesse. It's got a weed guard on there that's pretty solid, and it allows you to really throw that bait up into some thick stuff. And I use a size 1. That's about the perfect size for this Cinco. But I also put and you can kind of see it, it's like a wacky tool O-ring and it's this black O-ring that I basically use to hold on my bait a little bit better, to hold my hook onto my Senko a little bit better. And I use 10-pound test with a 12-pound braid leader. The 10-pound test is a Berkeley 100% fluorocarbon, and I tie an FG knot with about 10-15 foot leader of fluorocarbon to a 12-pound Sunline SX1 braid. And I feel like that combo treats me pretty well. And I also use a really stiff rod. So this rod is one that a club member of ours made years ago. I've had this rod for probably 10 to 15 years. And it's a really stiff rod. It's a 7-foot medium heavy. And I actually broke off about 3 inches of the tip. And so it makes it a little bit stiffer. I didn't do that on purpose. I just broke the rod and put a new tip on it. And it seems to work really good for my wacky rigs. I don't know if it's this hook or what, but I really like a stiff rod in order to get that hook and just drive it home. But I set the hook pretty good on my wacky rigs. Another thing that I was doing was flipping a tube, and I basically was just a 4-inch green pumpkin tube with a 5/16 ounce TMO tackle, a tungsten weight. I pegged that, and I use a 3/0 laser trocar tube hook. That hook works pretty good for any of my tube flipping. It's the only hook I use for flipping a tube. But I threw that on a 7-foot medium heavy. That's a Lew's Custom Pro rod and a Hyper Mag reel with a 7:5 to 1 gear ratio. It allows me to pick up line really quick whenever I flip that tube out there. And that is with 20-pound Berkeley fluorocarbon, and that allows me to get those fish out of some heavy cover, and I can kind of horse them in a little bit more with that heavier line. But one other thing that I did, and honestly didn't even retie this the night before, I didn't plan on throwing it at all, but I picked up a jerkbait for a few casts, and on one of my casts I hooked into like a 4-pounder, and it come off right by the boat. And that one would have won me the tournament, but obviously when you hook them on a jerkbait, a lot of times they come off, and that time was not very good for me. So I threw that on a Lew's Custom Light rod. It's a jerkbait rod. It's a 6/8 medium light, and I also threw that with 10-pound test and a Team Lew's Light reel. That's a 6:5 to 1 gear ratio, and 10-pound Berkeley 100% fluorocarbon. So that's kind of what I did. I basically just threw a wacky rig probably 95% of the tournament, and almost worked out really good for me. I missed 3 fish on my wacky rig, and then I missed that big one on my jerkbait. So it was kind of, I mean, it was a good day. I had 3 for 10 pounds, so I had 3 good ones, but I was really disappointed with my execution on those other 4 fish, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. I don't really think I did anything wrong on those fish. Maybe reeled the jerkbait fish in a little bit too hard, but other than that, I don't think I did anything wrong. It's just some days you get them in the boat, and some days you miss them, and that was one of those days where I wasn't meant to win, and ended up missing them. But one thing I did notice at the end of the day, which I thought was really cool, because I've seen it a few times, but not a ton, but like I pulled into one pocket on Friday of practice and was looking for beds up shallow and never really saw anything. And then late in the day at like 2 o'clock, I pulled into this one cove, and I was going down the bank, and my co-angler goes, "Look, there's one right there." And same pocket that I went through the other day and didn't see anything. I was basically just fishing through this pocket because I didn't have anywhere else to fish. There was boats in all the other little pockets, so I was like, oh, let's just go in here. Even though I didn't see any, hopefully there's some fish that moved up or whatever. Well, my co-angler saw that one. I ended up catching that one, and then I went probably 50 to 100 yards back in there even further, and I saw another really nice one, about 3.5 pounds, that I ran out of time on. But it was just cool seeing how those fish had moved up probably within the last half an hour of me pulling into that pocket. And it really goes to show that in some of those sight fishing tournaments, sometimes you just need to go look for new fish instead of just running all the fish that you have marked. So to me, that was kind of cool. That was a eye-opening experience. I know those fish can move up any minute, and I'm sure that the week following there might have been a ton of fish flooding the banks, but kind of interesting. So I ended up with a 9th place finish with 3 fish for 10 pounds. It's a good way to start out the year. Top 10 in the points right now. Last year we finished 2nd in the points, and we would really like to win Angler of the Year this year. So we're going to give it our all. The next one's at Rocky Point, and that is June 7th. So a week after the IBF at Brookville, we're going to head to Rocky Point. Should be a good tournament. Not as long as we're not flooded out or something like that. It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll be flipping something or throwing a spinnerbait, or just the keeping it simple on the Ohio River type stuff. So we're gonna see what we can do, and hopefully we can get some more good points and maybe move up into the points. Hopefully keep a good BFL season going and make a run at that Angler of the Year. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.